The next subject that I want to talk about is one that I haven't talked about in a few weeks, but I heard something recently on YouTube. I found a very interesting YouTube video. It was an interview with a guy by the name of Chris Gore, and it actually kind of helped me focus my perspective on certain things in relation to Star Wars that have actually kind of, I wouldn't say, I mean, I don't actively wrestle with them. I don't sit around thinking about these things all day, but it was every so often I'll find something that kind of gets me to think about these things. And this guy actually said something that was very interesting. And basically one thing that he was talking about in this video was he was talking about, as a writer, how do you kill an iconic fictional character? And there's obviously ways that you do it, and there's ways that you don't do it. But ultimately, the most important thing about the way that you do it is he says that the most important thing that you have to give not only the other characters, in the film or in the book or whatever it is that you're writing. So not only the characters, but also the audience. You have to give them some form of closure. And so he talked about the way that they killed off Han Solo in The Force Awakens. And it was this almost kind of disregardful kind of killing. Where he was just, he was stabbed through the heart with a lightsaber, and then he wound up falling into a pit. And this Chris Gore guy, he says that basically that's not the way that you kill a hero. That's the way that you kill a villain. And actually, I think that when you really think about it, that holds true. I mean, that's how they killed off the Emperor in the Jedi and Return of the Jedi. It's how they killed off Hans Gruber in Die Hard. Think about it. How often, do you see that befall a villain in a movie? It is pretty often. But if you kill off a hero, if you kill off an iconic hero, well, then you need to have some kind of closure surrounding that character's death, and it has to have some kind of a meaning. And you need to have, a final moment with that character in one form or another. And so you need to either be able to hear the character's last words, or see a funeral or something of the like. But you need to have that last moment. And with Han Solo, that was something that, at least through the first two movies, we were very much denied that. Not so much with Luke Skywalker. I think it's fair to say that his confrontation with Kylo Ren fit the bill in that. So interestingly enough, the guy that kind of gets dumped on more than anybody else for what Star Wars became with this sequel trilogy, off the bat, he did a better job of this than J.J. Abrams did. And I honestly do believe that a lot of people, even if they don't like what J.J. Abrams did with Star Wars, they at the very least do prefer it to what Rian Johnson did. And there was at least one scene in the Rise of Skywalker where you can definitely look at that as saying, maybe J.J. Abrams admitting that he made a mistake, and basically saying it's like, okay, we have to do this to correct this error. And so, of course, that's the moment where, Kylo Ren, he's on the wreckage of the Death Star on the planet Endor. Well, pardon me, the moon of Endor. But he's on the wreckage of the Death Star, and he's just been beaten by Rey, and he's sitting there and he's doubting himself. And then you would almost say like the Force specter of Han Solo, if he ever had such a thing, appears to him and gives him basically what amounts to kind of like a consolation / pep talk. Now, there is an opinion that a lot of people hold of these Star Wars films, and you can share it or you cannot share it. And I'm not entirely sure whether or not I myself completely share it. I think maybe there is, there's a lot of rumors to this effect. But basically that the people that sat down in the Lucasfilm story group to plot out these movies, they didn't really have a lot of use or respect, not only for the characters that had kind of made this franchise what it was. There was that story about how they would, they put a picture of Luke Skywalker up on their little on their little bulletin board that they kind of used to plot all this stuff up, and then they drew an X over his face, and it was like, oh, we're going to get this guy out of here. I've never seen anything that actually confirmed that that was something that happened. It's a story that is often repeated. And so a lot of people believe that not only was there this lack of respect for the characters, but also there was a lack of respect for the previous audience. And the idea that they could ever have just dispensed with Han Solo in this way, it is very tempting to take that as a confirmation of this. It's kind of tempting to consider this to be akin to something like this. Imagine that a friend of yours passes away, or a family member passes away, and somebody who's supposed to plan the funeral, for whatever reason, they decide that they don't like you, and they tell you that you can't come. Don't come to the funeral. And you don't get that sense of closure with your friend. And the way that a lot of people connect with these characters, that they do kind of almost start to view them as friends of a sort, companions through life, if you identify closely enough with a character. And so the fans, once they start to feel disrespected, well, then you see all this other behavior that the Star Wars fandom has become actually kind of famous for over the last few years, where they lash out at the creators, and they lash out at the new characters. And that is one thing that I have always found to be a little bit peculiar. I mean, I can understand why people might be moved to criticize these new characters that they had in this past trilogy. But for my personal tastes, I didn't think that these were bad characters. I think in some cases there were characters that they didn't do very much with. I mean, Rose Tycho was kind of given to us as this, character that was supposed to be very, very important. And then Kelly Marie Tran didn't really get much of an opportunity to do very much with her because, the writing that went along with the character was just very, very not good. And so I do think that it's fair to say that, I mean, regardless of what J.J. Abrams' intentions were with that, I do think that it's safe to say that if the death of Han Solo had been treated in a very different manner, that probably the narrative surrounding the Star Wars sequel trilogy today would probably be very different than it actually turned out to be. And it could have spared all of us a lot of this talk about toxic fandoms and the fandom menace and all of these things that you hear about. We could have had, a much stronger, much more harmonious fandom. I mean, at least as harmonious as nerd fandoms ever do get. Really, if they had just approached this one thing very, very differently. I don't know if the writers intended this or what they actually intended there. Hey, I'm not in the writer's room. I don't know any of them. And really, it would be my preference to just kind of presume that really they did intend for the best. I know that has not been the most common belief within the Star Wars fandom. I would say probably for at least the last 7 years, but really, what are you going to do about it? It's, when you get down to it, it's a kid's movie, and it probably should not be that important, but it just, for people that are fans of this franchise, it just is.